This is Social Studies Chapter 1 for Mr. Schwieder's class. We're talking about Chapter 1, and we're talking about First Nations. Um, there's a couple different things that First Nations groups share. That the first is very close relationship with nature. This is just because they dealt with a lot of their food, all of their food and all of their stuff came with nature, and they had to hunt and gather a lot of that stuff, which gave them a close relationship to nature. You don't take it for granted. You respect it very much so, because when you're in it every day, it just changes the way you look at it. And that was the way the First Nations developed a close relationship with nature. A lot of their stories comes through natures, and a lot of their animals, they didn't just kill any animal for sport. They did it for food, and they tried to use everything about it. They said thanks every time they killed it, because they realized that they were taking its life so that they could continue on. Um, Another thing was, most First Nations passed knowledge down through traditional teaching, such as oral stories instead of a written stories. They didn't have the written words, so they would write things down, and they would teach them. They would teach the older people would teach the younger people. The role of elders um, in a lot of the tribes was to teach and to pass on these stories and these teachings, just so um, the young people could learn the ways of their tribe. Um, yeah, those are the two things that we're focused on so far. When we talk about names, we prefer in grade 7, we don't call them Indians anymore, because Indians mean people from India. It's they when the Europeans showed up here, they believed that they could change whatever name they want to whatever name. So when the First Nations didn't want to be called an Indian, they said, no, you're an Indian. I don't care what you want. I don't care what you want to be called. So it took until a long time, and we're slowly changing that idea now. But it's it's not a positive term that we want to use in this class. So there are 3 tribes that we're going to talk about within Chapter 1. First one is the Mi'kmaq. The Mi'kmaq lived on the very east coast in Nova Scotia, and they had a different form of government because women were equal in this government. They chose their leaders, which were usually men, but it could be women as well, and those leaders would reach a consensus within the tribe. Those consensus means to all agree on one decision. So they would talk and talk and talk about this until everybody was on the same page and saw the issue, or saw the resolution to that issue, and agreed upon the way they should do it. If somebody wholeheartedly disagreed, then they would continue to go and talk about it until either they changed everybody's opinion or that person changed their opinion. There were 7 district chiefs. There was a grand council, and when all the Mi'kmaq came together and had a really big problem, they could come together and they could um, again reach a consensus about what to do. But Mi'kmaq were all about consensus. When we get to the Haudenosaunee of the Northeast Woodlands, there were 6 different First Nations. There was actually 5, and then there was a 6th later on. But there was the Mohawk, the Noaida. Anyways, there's 5 different, and then there was a 6th added later on. Um, and the Haudenosaunee was a little bit different from the um, Mi'kmaq out east. They did make decisions by consensus. However, it was the men who were in charge. They were the leaders, but the women were the ones that put them in charge. Now, the women in the community, were it was a matrilineal society, which means Ma kind of ruled the tribe. So the woman would put a man in charge, and if the woman didn't like what the man was doing, they could replace it. If the woman didn't like a law that was passed, they could veto that law. It was the women made all of the final decisions, but they would let the men run it until until the women believed that they needed to step in and put the ship back on the right course. So um, they farmed the three sisters, and those three sisters, represented what they were doing. You had a different role, but you would all kind of come together, and you would support it, even though you were different things. You each had a role, and you would support each other. And yeah, so the women they had a very, very big part in the Haudenosaunee. The Iroquois Confederacy, they were known to the French as the Iroquois. They are known in grade 7 as the Haudenosaunee, and to the English they were known as the the council, the five nations. Um, so yeah, those were, and then later on the Six Nations, the Six Nation Council. Um, Again, we've talked about that. The women, when they made decisions, the seven generations came in. This is kind of a way to look at it, but the seven generations is, if how will this generation, or how will this decision affect our tribe or this world or this land in 7 generations? So is it a good decision for us and everybody in the future? Finally, we get to the Anishinaabe. The Anishinaabe were northern and central Ontario and southern Manitoba. So they were a patriarch, which is a P-A, patriarch, which is father is in charge. So the men had a larger um, role in the decision making process. Um, Women were still important. They were still needed in the community. Obviously, they were involved in the harvest. They were involved in raising kids. They were involved in many different things. But the men made the decisions when it came to crops. The harvest was communal. So we're learning about communal. Communal means that everybody benefits. So everybody gets the same amount. So um, everybody was supposed to harvest the rice at the same time, and then everybody would get, a set amount of rice, that not based on work, but based on equality. So communal is how you split things up. Consensus is agreeing on a decision. So those are two C words that you need to know the difference of. Solving problems. The Anishinaabe, within their clan, they had 6 different clans. So within their tribe, they had 6 different clans. They had birds, deers, marten, bear, fish, loon, crane, um, and each clan had a different role. But there were hunters and gatherers and food. They were the warriors. The fish were the teachers. The loon and the crane were the leaders. The bear, everybody had a role to do, and they all kind of came together to live in a successful community. Um, it was, yeah, when we talk about the economy of the First Nations at that time, it was mostly hunter gathering. There was not a lot of farming. And they would trade with each other. There was not a lot of outside. There was no European influence, and that kind of changed when the Europeans arrived, obviously. So the key parts, again, Mi'kmaq, are through consensus, where everybody is equal and everybody comes to the same decision. The Haudenosaunee are matriarch, and the women had a very, very large role. And Anishinaabe are patriarch, and the women had a lessened role in the Anishinaabe society. The C word for Anishinaabe is communal, and it refers to farming. So I hope that helps.